WADR, promoting dialogue.
Good evening and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasted on 94.9 FM and around the world on wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. Here are the top stories. Trade Union Congress in Ghana demands urgent pension and labor reform at 2025 May Day celebration.
I am referring to the politicians, judges, senior military officers and policemen and women and other public servants who retire on their salaries. We need a reset here. Pension unification must happen under your leadership.
And Senegal workers' unions stand up against layoffs in the public sector. Liberia's President Joseph Boakai issues Executive Order 147 for mandatory identification enrollment.
Because by having the biometric national citizen ID card, it is important so that we identify who is in and who is going out.
And United Nations calls for probe of alleged executions by Malian army and Russian mercenaries. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is a more edit with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast and a warm welcome to all of our listeners across the sub-region and beyond. Let's begin with some news on May Day. In Ghana, the trade union congresses made a clarion call for wide-ranging reforms in the country's pension and labor systems. Addressing scores of workers and government officials during the 2025 May Day celebration organized, Labour cited delayed government contributions on pension funds, weak regulation of the second-tier schemes, and increasing attacks on workers' rights as urgent issues requiring presidential intervention. Meanwhile, President Mahama has assured the workers of the commitment of his administration to collaborate with organized labor to improve the lot of Ghanaian workers. Nadia Tete reports.
In his address at the 2025 May Day Parade, TUC Secretary General Joshua Ansah emphasized the need to broaden the pension base to include all income-earning workers, stressing that this would ease the strain on the national budget.
I am referring to the politicians, judges, senior military officers and policemen and women and other public servants who retire on their salaries. We need a reset here. Pension unification must happen under your leadership. Fairness demands that all workers with savings capacity contribute towards their pension. It will make a big relief to the already stretched government budget.
He raised concerns about the government's delay in paying workers' pensions contributions, warning that such practices were negatively impacting investment returns and threatening the stability of pension funds. The TUC also took issue with what it described as increasing government control over the Social Security and National Insurance Trust, SNIT, demanding reforms to give Labour greater say in its governance.
Government must know that SNIT funds have greater say in the management of those funds. In a resetting mode, organized labor demands reform of SNIT and majority membership of the board to have a greater say in the appointment of board chairpersons and director general.
On labour rights, Mr. Ansah lamented a growing trend of employer hostility towards unionization efforts, particularly within foreign-owned companies. He cited the recent dismissal of 3 workers at Sono Nasogli for attempting to join a union. Mr. Ansah criticized private employment agencies for exploiting workers and urged tighter regulation. He ended by calling on the government and employers to protect workers' rights and promote fair and inclusive labour practices. President Mahama, who graced the occasion, assured the workers of the commitment of his administration to collaborate with organised labour to improve the lot of Ghanaian workers.
Fellow citizens, let me say this clearly to all Ghanaian workers. Whether you're a teacher in the classroom, whether you're a nurse in a rural chips compound, whether you're a porter in the market, whether you're a miner deep in the bowels of the earth, whether you're a security guard on night shift, a digital or innovator writing codes from your laptop, I want to tell all Ghanaian workers that you matter. Your contribution matters, and your dreams matter to us. And under my government, we will make sure that those dreams are realized.
This year's May Day celebration was under the theme Striving for Peace and Stability to drive industrialization, trade and decent work for social justice. For WADR, Nadiri Tete, Accra.
Meanwhile, Ghana's President John Mahama has declared that his government would not renege on its fight against illegal mining activities in the country. Speaking during the May Day celebration on Thursday, President Mahama noted that the security agencies are still up to task and committed to the cause despite his earlier assurance to win the fight against Galamsey in 4 months while he was contesting for presidency. The president said his government will continue to crack down on individuals and companies involved in Galamsey activities. Since President Mahama assumed office on January 7, 2025, a number of individuals have been arrested and arraigned in relation to Galamsey activities.
The fight against Galamsey is a complex one. And when I was vying for the presidency, I did not kid myself that when I come into office, I will win that fight in 4 months. Yet, we will not give up. Our gallant men of the armed forces and security services are up to the fight and will continue to score successes against the selfish companies and individuals who are destroying our forests and polluting our water bodies. As far as the fight against Galamsey is concerned, I say, aluta continuam.
Ghana's President John Mahama speaking there. In Senegal, he had the government, workers' organizations and employers' organizations sign a social stability pact on Thursday. The signing ceremony took place at the government headquarters under the supervision of Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko. Earlier in the day, several hundred workers in front of the headquarters of one of the country's main unions, the National Confederation of Senegalese, protested. This is happening for the first time since independence, all of the country's trade unions demonstrating together, notably to oppose layoffs in the civil service that have taken place in recent months. Senegal's trade unions also want to speak with one voice to oppose these layoffs, which they consider unprecedented. So far, more than 400 permanent civil servants are reportedly affected. According to Ousmane Diallo, a member of the trade union front that organized the rally, there is reason to be afraid about the employment situation in Senegal.
To relieve the population first, everyone who has been laid off, part of the population is worried because people had 200% hope. But at the rate things are progressing, there is reason to be afraid because we are waiting for them to protect the existing works. We are waiting for them to create projects to encompass 75% of the young Senegalese who are knocking on the door of work. I think that's what should be their orientation. And on the other side too, we, the trade unions, are asking for prices to be lowered. It's very, very expensive and salaries are not increased. And currently, everyone is suffering, especially the common people. Even the middle class is starting to suffer because everything is expensive. Everything is expensive. So their priority should be to relieve the population first.
Ousmane Diallo is a member of the trade union front here in Senegal.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Nigeria, the organized labor has used the annual Workers' Day commemoration to demand sweeping reforms and accountability from the government. Among their demands is the immediate reversal of what they describe as the unconstitutional suspension of the elected government in Rivers State. Labor leaders also called for the stronger protection of civil liberties, economic justice, and an end to insecurity. We will bring you the full report in our 10 p.m. bulletin. In the meantime, Liberia's President Joseph Boakai has issued Executive Order 147, mandating the enrollment of all Liberians and foreign residents into the National Identification Registry, NIR. This order release emphasizes the necessity for the NIR to issue identification articles to every worker in both public and private institutions. WDL's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker has a report.
The executive order also stipulates that foreign visitors spending 90 days or more in Liberia are required to obtain a foreign identification article for tightening the regulations surrounding residence and identification in the country. President Bouaka underscored the importance of adhering to established data collection, storage, and management protocols, ensuring that these processes align with Part 9, Section 9.1 of the Entities Act of 2011. The measures outlined in the executive order are set to take immediate effect and will remain in force until further notice, showcasing the government's commitment to enhancing the identification framework within Liberia. A former senator and a member of investment, Sino Johnson, who has closely observed the dynamics of national security, stressed the importance of this initiative.
It has a strong security background because by having the biometric national citizen ID card, it is important so that we identify who is in and who is going out. So I think the president executive order is overdue. It should have been done a long time. We've been pushing for that. Let us identify all of our people that are here. Let know who are in our country. And by that way, you prevent criminals. There are people who want to come into this country. They are hardcore criminals.
The Liberian Senate has since endorsed the president's latest decision. The anticipated rollout of the biometric ID card system could mark a turning point in the country's approach to security and identity management. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
Now let's shift our focus to a different subject. It has been almost a week since Pope Francis was buried in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, Italy. Following his death on April 21 of this year, the time has come for his succession. The 133 cardinal electors from around the world will gather on May 7 to elect his successor. One cardinal to watch closely is Robert Serra from Guinea. However, in Conakry, both Christians and Muslims are joining forces to support his candidacy for the head of the Catholic Church. Well, here are some reactions from stakeholders.
Nowadays, there is a strong chance that the balance may weigh in on this side, since Cardinal Robert Serra has distinguished himself in his positions, in his vision of the Church, and I believe he has every chance. Given his conservative stance and his mystery of international issues, as well as his understanding of canon law and the realities of the Church, I believe he meets the criteria necessary to be elected Pope in the current context. To say that it is out of the question for the Church to bless, regardless of the context, homosexual couples.
The problem is not a matter of ethnicity, it is a matter of God. May the will of God be done. That is our prayer.
Reaction from Catholic stakeholders there in Guinea. You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on wadr.org. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Trade Union Congress in Ghana demands urgent pension and labor reforms at 2025 May Day celebration. In Senegal, workers' unions stand up against layoffs in the public sector. Liberia's President Bouaka issues Executive Order 147 for mandatory identification enrollment. And still ahead in the news, United Nations calls for probe of alleged executions by Malian army and Russian mercenaries. We do have a guest interview and sport news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Don't forget you can listen to us live on wadr.org, and we invite you to join our live streaming on Facebook and YouTube. Now, Malians are reacting to recommendations that emerged from the recent consultations with key stakeholders about revising the political party charter. The main conclusions from the two-day consultations include the dissolution of all political parties and the appointment of General Assimi Goïta as President of the Republic for a renewable 5-year term. However, there are varying opinions among ordinary Malians regarding this controversial proposal. While some support the recommendations, others strongly oppose them. Well, here are the citizens' reactions.
The political parties should be dissolved outright, and I completely agree with that. I would have maintained power for 5 years without elections and renewable until the country was specified. I completely agreed. If it's a consensus, I don't think it's a problem. For me, it's not my choice to dissolve political parties. For me, I do not agree. He has already done 5 years. In reality, we do not go to the election. Still, he must resign. He presented himself as committed to doing it. Coming with the idea that political parties should be dissolved seems to me today to be a completely incongruous idea without involving others. At this rate, we are heading towards social tensions within the country.
Well, we just heard citizens' reactions to recommendations that resulted from a recent consultation on the review of the political party charter in Mali. Well, we do have more stories from Mali. And now, the United Nations experts have urged Malian authorities to investigate reports of alleged summary executions and forced disappearances by the army and Russian mercenaries following the discovery of dozens of bodies near a military camp last week. According to a statement from the UN Humanitarian Agency, the bodies were found near the Kuala military camp in western Mali's Kulikoro region between April 21 and 22 and are suspected to be those of men arrested by Malian soldiers and mercenaries from the Russia-backed Wagner Group 10 days earlier. Chris Wattijo has more details in this report.
Citing unconfirmed reports, the agency said around 60 men, most of them ethnic Fulani, were allegedly tortured and interrogated at the camp about alleged links with terrorists before being executed. However, spokesperson for Mali's military and the government did not immediately respond to requests for comments. The UN expert said that if confirmed, the killings may amount to war crimes, while the forced disappearances may constitute crimes against humanity. They urged Malian authorities to conduct an independent and transparent investigation into the killings and forced disappearances of the men. Fulani people, also known as the Pale, are disproportionately represented in Islamic militant groups in central Mali, which has led to them being stigmatized by other ethnic groups and security forces. Mali, along with neighbors Burkina Faso and Niger, has for more than a decade battled an insurgency fought by armed groups, including some aligned with Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State group. Following military coups in all three nations in recent years, the ruling juntas have expelled French forces and turned to Russian mercenary units for security assistance instead. Since seizing power in 2021, interim President Assimi Goïta has struggled to curb violence in Mali, while the army has been accused of targeting civilians. In December, Human Rights Watch accused Malian armed forces and the Wagner Group of deliberately killing at least 32 civilians over an 8-month span.
Christopher Ticho filed a report. And finally, from the Sahel, nearly 10 years after the Bamako attacks, Mali has placed Mauritanian jihadist Fawaz Oud Ahmed alias Ibrahim 10 on its national financial sanctions list. Sentenced to death in 2024 terrorism, the man is now subject to an asset freeze as part of the country's efforts to strengthen the fight against terrorist financing. Augustin Kuli completes the story.
The Malian government, by ministerial decree dated April 30, 2025, added Mauritanian national Fawad Ould Ahmed, known by the name Ibrahim 10, to the national list of targeted financial sanctions. This decision, made public in the official journal of the Republic of Mali, comes nearly a decade after the bloody attacks that plunged Bamako into mourning in 2015. According to Malian authorities, Ibrahim 10 actively participated in two major attacks. The attack on the La Terrace restaurant on March 7, 2015 and the attack on the Radisson Blu Hotel on November 20, 2015. These attacks, carried out by the jihadist group Al-Murabiton on behalf of the Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, left a total of 25 dead, including several foreign nationals, and many injured. The actions had a profound impact on national and international opinion, revealing Mali's vulnerability to urban terrorism. Born on December 25, 1978 in Ouachok, Islamic Republic of Mauritania, Fawad Ould Ahmed was arrested in April 2016 by Malian intelligence services after a manhunt conducted in close collaboration with regional intelligence services. During his trial in October 2020, he admitted the facts before the Bamako Assize Court. The verdict was final. He was sentenced to death for acts of terrorism, murder and criminal conspiracy in connection with a terrorist enterprise. Fawad Ould Ahmed, alias Ibrahim 10, remains one of the most well-known faces of transnational jihadism in the region.
Augustin Gulli filed that report.
Politics, analyses on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Well, our guest is Ernest Yeboah Iganan. Yeboah, who is the leader of the Economic Fighters League, says his movement is organizing a peaceful march in Ghana this month, specifically on Africa Liberation Day. However, the activist informs that the rally in Accra, which will follow many held in major cities across the sub-region and in the global north, is to support the Burkinabe transitional president, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. It tells WDR more about the march tag Walk with Traoré.
Captain Ibrahim Traoré represents the modern phase of the anti-imperialist struggle. The narrative has been that every time that Africa gets a sensible leader, and I mean a leader that thinks about their people, a leader that answers to the commonsensical questions of governance that appears to be eluding us in this Western democratic framework, it would appear that that leader is isolated through propaganda and then eliminated. They did it to Kwame Nkrumah, they did it to Lumumba, they did it to Sankara, they did it to Gaddafi, and the list is endless. On the contrary, governments or leaders that have obviously not acted in the interest of their people have been allowed to remain in power for as long as they want. When we had Gaddafi, this man who was able to materialize for the first time the idea that socialism is workable and brought honor and glory to his people, this guy was targeted and eliminated. Today, what is the story of Libya? And so we are very clear in our minds and do not take lightly the threats initiated by the African goon, Michael Langley, who told the U.S. Senate that Captain Traoré is using the resources of Burkina Faso to protect himself, in power. We know clearly from the script what they did with Gaddafi, Sankara, Kwame Nkrumah, and all, that they have begun and they are not going to stop. And so we African people are sending a strong message that if they would eliminate Comrade Traoré, then they may as well eliminate all of us, because he is not going to work it.
What does Ibrahim Traoré, represent to African youth? Is he a symbol of awakening or African ideologies like that resonate with the likes of Nkrumah that you mentioned, Sankara as well, Lumumba?
He is a symbol of the leadership that Africa requires to be able to get up from the indignity that it has been subjected to all these years. A commonsensical approach to governance. Look at our so-called democratic African presidents and look at the lives they lead and contrast it with the lives of the people they lead. It is clear and obvious that something does not add up. Contrast it with Comrade Traoré and look at his modesty and look at the programs he's undertaken in his country to ensure that poverty is kicked out of that country. And so everything points to the fact that Traoré represents that leadership that Africans have been yearning for.
What do you and other African youths fear most could actually happen to Ibrahim Traoré?
One, that he might go down the line like the way Nkrumah, Sankara, Gaddafi, and co did, which is also why we are taking the necessary steps that he doesn't go down that line. It is our duty, it is our responsibility to protect this beautiful son of the soil and ensure that what happened to our forefathers and foremothers does not befall him. He has taken to, a very courageous path where people or most of his colleagues, presidents, have run away. He has just decided to walk on that path. And so we just want to assure him that he is not walking alone. He is walking with the rest of Africa. And that is what May 25, this year's march is all about. We are walking with Traore to say hands off Africa and to call on Africa to unite.
Enes Yeboah is the leader of the Economic Fighters League in Ghana. And in sport news, Sierra Leone inflicted a heavy defeat on Egypt 4-1, while South Africa recovered against Tanzania 1-0 Wednesday evening during the Under-20 CAN in Egypt. The second day of Group A of the Under-20 offered two exciting matches as seen on Wednesday evening. In the standing, Sierra Leone leads the group with 4 points. Egypt will have to respond urgently against Zambia, while Tanzania will face Shooting Stars in their bid to survive. In today's match, Nigeria defeated Tunisia with a lone goal scored in the first half. Meanwhile, the Senegalese national beach soccer team will face Spain on Friday in the match counting towards the first day of the World Cup in this category. The Beach Soccer World Cup kicks off this Thursday and runs until May 11, 2025 in Seychelles, where the reigning African champions arrived 10 days ago. The Beach Lions beat the Italians 4-2 on Friday in a friendly match as part of their preparations. After Spain coach Umar Ngala Sila's Chargers will face Tahiti and Chile. The Beach Soccer World Cup will feature 16 countries divided into 4 groups of 4. The top 2 from each group will advance to the knockout stage, which will include the quarterfinals, semifinals, third place, playoff, and the final. Current Brazil is the defending champions. And we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mauro Diouf for the technical support. Do interact with us on our social media platforms, X, Instagram at WDR News. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is our flagship environment program, Enviroscope. I am Imo Edet. Good evening.
And many thanks to you for listening to